Hey guys, and welcome to our humble abode. We're back here in Montreal in our condo and we've been here since March 27th. Today is April 7th and I want to show you a twisty apple bread that is easy to make, fun, and delicious. Your mom's favorite channel makes a savory herb braided bread. So I've adapted that because I wanted a breakfast apple cinnamon bread that was a little bit sweet. So you have the apple, you have the cinnamon, it's braided, so it makes it look very artisanal and beautiful, and of course it tastes delicious. So let's get started on that video. All right guys, so we're gonna get started with this delicious apple cinnamon twisty bread. We're gonna be doing this in several steps. So the first step is going to be assembling the ingredients for the bread and letting it rise. And while that's rising, we're gonna be working on the apple filling. And finally, we're putting everything together, letting it do one final rise and putting it in the oven. Today, I'm going to be measuring everything in grams. It's a lot more precise in terms of measurements. We're gonna start by putting the bowl on the scale and zeroing it out and measuring in 350 grams of water. Next, we're putting in 20 grams of sugar, which ends up being about 2.5 tablespoons of sugar, and I'm using brown sugar. So I'm gonna stir that up, and then to this, I'm gonna be adding the yeast. We want 10 grams of yeast, which is about 2.5 teaspoons. I'm gonna stir that up, and I'm gonna let that proof. Next up, we're gonna work on the apple filling. You could use a few different types of sugar. I like coconut sugar. There's also brown sugar, and those two types of sugar work really well here because they have a bit of a caramel flavor. So that works really well with the apple pie filling. Also, you can make this date syrup. So what you want to do in advance, I mean, overnight you could have a half a cup of water with about 25 medjool dates, kind of just sitting and simmering. Then you blend it up, and that's your date syrup. I like to use a date syrup. In this recipe, it doesn't really matter that much. We're adding sugar in different instances anyway. We're adding sugar actually to the filling mix. So let's get started with these apples. We're gonna cook them up on the stovetop and make them nice and soft so that they're ready to fill into the bread. So now we're slicing these up, thin but not too thin. Next, we're gonna turn on the heat to about medium heat. I'm adding 2 tablespoons of water. 1 teaspoon of pumpkin pie spice or cinnamon, whatever you have. I use this McCormick pumpkin pie spice, which has all the spices you need for apple pie, but you could also use cinnamon. Then you would add a tablespoon of sugar. I'm going to use my date syrup. Come to think of it, I think I'm going to add 3 tablespoons of the date syrup. And then you want to add about a tablespoon of flour. The filling is more of an art than a science. I'm going to keep that simmering on low. Probably for about 15 to 30 minutes. Oh, that's beautiful, and it smells just divine. I'm gonna let that simmer down until the apples are a little bit softer and it's reduced a little bit. And I'm gonna do that on low heat. My apple pie filling is still simmering, but now it's time to get the dough separated and roll it out and kind of get it prepped for filling it. As you could see, that rose really nicely. And I want to split that in half, so I'm actually going to measure it out. So we have 997 grams, roughly a kilo. I'm gonna change bowls. Zero it out. All right, so we have it here now at 497, 496, so that's roughly half. I'm gonna flour my surface. You're gonna need a rolling pin for this. I have, in a pinch, used a full wine bottle in the past. Just make do with whatever you happen to have on hand. All right, so let's get started rolling it out. All right, guys, so that's about done. Turned into a square, but that's as rectangular as it's gonna get. All right. Our next step, we're gonna finish off the filling. So we'll add a teaspoon of pumpkin spice or cinnamon spice, a half a cup of sugar. We'll add a quarter cup of butter, and I ended up putting a total of 4 tablespoons of water into my apple mix. While the butter is melting, I'm going to prepare my bread pan. So I'm going to get some coconut oil and oil that. And that way, with the flour and the oil, the bread will come easily out of the pan. Look at that beauty. Now, if you'd like, you can actually put these in a food processor or a blender so you could have small pieces of apple, but I kind of want to have the big chunks of apple, so I'm gonna leave it like that. So now I'm gonna take about half of the filling and spread that evenly in the dough. Next, we're gonna roll it up. Then we're gonna slice it down the middle with a really sharp knife. And And then you want to cut it about in half, and then we're going to braid it. So that's all there is to it. It's not a true braid, it's kind of just folding it over. And it goes into the pan just like that. And now we're going to set it aside for an hour to rise. And now for the next one. This one is turning out to be a nicer rectangle than my first one. And we're going to cut it down the middle once again. This is our second loaf. That's going to expose that beautiful filling, and it's going to give a gorgeous braided effect. Oh, I can almost taste it. So good. Okay, this time we're going to be using a different dish. And there we have it. So now we're going to set this one aside as well. I want this one right there. Set this one aside as well for an hour. All right, so we're ready to pop this one in the oven at 350 between 25 and 30 minutes. If you have a kitchen thermometer, the internal temperature should be between 190 and 195. I'm gonna put this one in first because the other one hasn't risen as well. So now it's time to test the temperature, and oh my God, it just looks gorgeous. There's about 3.5 minutes left on the timer. I did actually set it originally for 25 minutes, but I'm gonna test it anyway. Just by the golden color on the top of the bread, it already looks ready, and I'm at 188 Fahrenheit, 189. Yeah, I'll call that done. It's gonna be 190 in a second. Yeah, so it's 190. I'm gonna take it out. So that was 25 minutes. And this bread didn't go in first because it needed a little bit more time to rise, but it's looking good now, and it's gonna even rise some more in the oven. Now that looks absolutely beautiful. They're so good, and if you slice off a piece and just throw it in the toaster before breakfast and put some peanut butter on it, it's just so yummy. And also, I mean, because it's braided like this and it looks so beautiful, it's kind of a centerpiece. So that's something that you can bring out for, let's say, I don't know, coffee with a friend. You know, you can have it with coffee, you can have it with tea as an afternoon snack. It's a sweetbread, so it's nice when you have company. I'm also looking forward to seeing the next loaf because it has a more traditional loaf shape. This one, because I didn't want to put both of them in the loaf pan, I wanted to see how the shapes would evolve with the yeast, with the rise. I wanted to have two different but still interesting shapes, but you can of course put it in a loaf pan if you don't want it to spread out as much as this one did, because this one did spread out substantially. So now it's time to test this bread.
Get in my belly.
So at 25 minutes, this one still has a ways to go. So we're gonna pop that back in there for another 5 minutes, but it looks very light. So I'm thinking maybe another 10 minutes. We'll check it out in 5 minutes. Oh, that looks good. Still off, another 5 minutes. Trust me when I tell you that this smells amazing. 195, 197. Okay, so we pushed it a little bit too far. Yeah, so it's about 200 degrees, although it should be between 190 and 195. That will be just fine. It's a beautiful loaf of bread. All right. And there she is. So here they are, guys, in all of their beautiful splendor. So they turned out even better than I could have hoped for, especially the one on the right, because it has a really fun, nice shape to it. The one on the left is going to be easier to cut up into slices and put in the toaster. But if you have a toaster oven, then that's not going to be a problem for either one of them. Overall, I am super pleased with how this turned out. I hope you are too. If you'd like to support our channel, please like and subscribe and turn on that notification bell. See you in the next video.